Welcome back, everyone. Happy holidays. A new year's upon us. This wasn't the most productive year for the channel. I have a feeling that's going to change going into 2024. And of course, I have been gaming when I have time, so we are here to sort of recap everything that I have played over more or less the last year. Quite frankly, this was one of those years where there was just too much stuff that looked great. And there may be some omissions from this list that might be surprising, but I intend on playing them when I get a chance to. So we're going to pretty much do this the same way we did it last time, which means we're going to sort of try to do this from worst to best, starting with Lord of the Rings Gollum. Now you may be asking why I played this at all, and I really wish I had an answer that made any sense. But the truth is that I saw it for sale for like $9, and I just felt like I had to see it for myself. And yeah, this game is really not good. But what I will say about it is that it is not as bad as some of the low placements from last year. It is definitely not as bad as Baldur, and while this is going to sound kind of crazy to say, I kind of had more fun with it than I had playing Cyberpunk at any point back then. I mean, the game has obviously gotten even more updates, and I haven't played it, so I'm not saying that Gollum is better than Cyberpunk now, but roughly a year and a half ago, Gollum was more fun than that. But it's not good, and it really is at the low end of like what is acceptable. And I will also say that I was playing the PlayStation 5 version of Gollum, and from what I have seen, the PC version is way more messed up. If you played on that, I understand hating this game even more. It's one of those games where you wonder if it could have ever been good, because who wants to play as Gollum? I personally think that you could do something interesting with that. This could have really worked as a narrative adventure game, something kind of like Telltale. There are little glimpses of that in the game, but the game is mostly platforming, and it's very similar to the platforming from Assassin's Creed and Uncharted, but worse. The story is like nothing. I think that's the biggest problem, is that this is an entire game that's like 6-ish hours long, 6 to 8 hours, and it's built out of like maybe 3 sentences worth of information from Lord of the Rings. Like, okay, Gollum was here once, and he talked to these people, and then he left. And that's not interesting. And see, even the bits in that lore that they could have used, they avoid, probably for budgetary reasons. I actually watched a really great documentary about the making of this game, and how, well, it's mostly about how the studio that made this game was kind of on the skids, and unfortunately they're gone. So it is really unfortunate. Daedalic Entertainment, I believe, and they've actually made a bunch of adventure games in the past, and I've been interested in checking them out, so maybe I'll do that to see what sort of stuff they did that got them a bit of a following in the first place. But yeah, it just really seems like they were trying to make something that was close to AAA in ambition, and they just did not have the money, they did not have the resources, and the result is a game that is so bad it's good for about the first half. There's just hilarious nonsense a lot of the time, especially when you screw up platforming and Gollum ragdolls around. There were some great moments that reminded me of terrible games from eras past. And it was really amazing to see something like this being made now. But what I will say, if you, for whatever reason, want to play Gollum, once you have left Mordor, and you have caught up to the frame story at the beginning of the game, where you are in the elf place, we'll call it, you might as well just stop. Because the game just kind of really... It hit its peak with Mordor, particularly with this terrible platforming sequence that you have to do near the end. You're not going to get much out of playing the rest of the game, quite frankly. I think that it lacks the fun. There's so many bugs, 1 or 2 crashes. One of the final puzzles in the game was bugged in a way where the game mixed up all of the possible, I guess all the parameters. It was one of those puzzles where you have to interact with things to make a symbol, and there's a couple different symbols that you can make. The game would react to a symbol that I had made as if it was a different one. So as I am doing the correct solution, the game is saying, no, that looks like something totally different. And thankfully, I was still able to complete it, but in order to complete the puzzle, I had to disregard all of the clues and do one of the incorrect answers because the game just kind of forgot what the correct answer was. So there was some weird stuff, for sure. But yeah, no, this game, I feel more bad for it. I think they could have made something interesting, and it just did not work out that way. I don't know. The story that they went with in this game does not work. There really isn't much of a story. But I think it might have been possible. I don't see why you couldn't have made a game about Gollum. Like, yeah, he can't really fight people and stuff, but you could at least explore his mind and all the things that have happened to him over time. You know, in those little bits that obviously were not shown in Lord of the Rings. So, yeah, I can't recommend this game unless you can get it really cheap and you enjoy a terrible platformer. But even then, I don't know. So, yeah, this game was the clear worst game I played this year. I mean, I intentionally sought it out because it didn't look good. I don't think it's the worst game that came out this year. I think our good friends over who did The Day Before ensured that they dropped the worst game of the year. I mean, how do you release a game and then 4 days later just everything? Oh my gosh. I mean, if you don't know about that game, good for you, but wow, that has to be the worst game of the year. I just can't see a world where it's not, given everything that just went down with it. Now, I don't really think that any of the games I'm going to talk about after Gollum are straight up bad, but we'll just put them as, like, enjoyed the least. And we have Midnight Suns, and this one hurts. It hurts to put this so low on the list, because Midnight Suns, it is a Marvel superhero game, but it is a tactical game, RPG elements, card battle game, sort of. It's made by the developers of the XCOM franchise, and that's really what drew me to it, because I love those XCOM games, and I wanted to see more of what they do. And this is really different from XCOM as far as being a tactical game, not just because you have this whole card mechanic, but a lot of the random elements in XCOM are not a thing in this game. It focuses a lot more on guaranteed abilities. Like, you can't really miss with attacks, for example. You don't really even have basic attacks. You have special powers that you can do. The effects are generally very reliable, and it is a lot about resource management and doing things at the right time, which is also an element of XCOM. So, I think that they definitely were doing some interesting stuff with this game. I really did enjoy the card combat. It was cool. My only criticism of it is just that, you know, you have a good amount of characters. Every character is unique, and every character has unique cards in their deck. And so, quite frankly, the more characters you get, if you really want to try to optimize their decks, it just does get complicated. And it was kind of like too complicated, honestly. After a certain point, I was like, you know, I want to use this character, but I have to, like, read all these cards, and, you know, the font size on the cards was really tiny, too. So, you know, that's preparation that I'm okay with doing. But if you love optimization and that sort of thing, there's really something for you here in regards to that. But that said, I don't think I tried too hard to be amazing, and I still beat the game. Now, unfortunately, and this is really the reason the game is so low, is that the combat, the tactical combat, great. Basically everything else about the game, a huge slog. Because this game gave me a lot of deja vu. Actually, I think it could give people deja vu for multiple games. One that I really felt was Dragon Age Inquisition, specifically. Because a regurgitation of old BioWare, here's what you do in between the missions thing, where you can walk around as your main character. You walk around this big area, there's stuff to collect, there's all these little currencies that you have to manage, I really didn't enjoy that. All these little gauges that you have to fill, rank up this, rank up that, socialize with every single character. It adds up to a lot, and I really don't think that it was worth it, because a lot of these elements, I struggle to see how they even tie back into the combat. Like, it just got to a point where I was like, I don't know, do I really want to be hanging out with Wolverine and Blade at a book club tonight? Like, is this really a choice I have to make? Like, what? Yeah, I don't know. They tried to marry some of that management stuff that you see in some RPGs and social elements. I'm not going to say it's Persona vibes, because it really wasn't, but there was an element of like, yeah, you get to hang out with all the superheroes, and I don't think that was a terrible idea, but I just was not that invested in it, and it just took so much time, especially all this stuff where you can wander around in the woods and get these abilities to open up other parts of the overworld. Holy crap, did that all feel like a titanic waste of time. And, there were some bugs and things mostly related to it as well. So, this game has issues, and they get in the way of the fun. And honestly, I really wish there was a way to just turn it all off. Just totally change the progression, and cut out all this stuff. XCOM is a game you can play over and over again, and have totally different experiences, because all your battles and the path that you take to research all the things can change. But this game, you're going to have to do a lot of stuff over and over again. Like, if you replay the game, I don't want to have to level up my relationship with all these characters again. And I know there's probably New Game Plus and things like that where it carries over, but, like, I don't know. I just, the experience was not great. I wish I could just do battles and not have to worry about anything else. That was sort of my takeaway. So, it really sucks that this game didn't do well, because now XCOM as a whole, I think, is in jeopardy. Jake Solomon, who was the designer, the director, really, of the whole thing, he's gone now. So, I don't know if this game has unfortunately set XCOM back. I was hoping for a third XCOM. That really does suck, because I think they had a great product as far as the core gameplay. They just couldn't figure out how to market it to, like, I hesitate to say normies, but you have to market it towards the core Marvel fan base. And so all the stuff they slapped on top of that to make it feel like an RPG and to add role-playing, and it did not work for me as well as it should have. And I think also part of why it didn't do well was because the Marvel elements that they were focusing on are pretty niche. Other than the superheroes who you can play as, it's all tied to this supernatural stuff that is really not that well known unless you are into those comics. And I don't think most people are, quite frankly. So, yeah, I give this game an A for effort, but it just was not quite the flavor that I was expecting. So, I don't know, I wish them all the best. But yeah, that's all I really have to say about Midnight Suns. And we're moving on to another game here, Bayonetta 3. So, I think a lot of people have kind of forgotten about this. I mean, it was a year ago. But I think when it was a year anniversary, people were like, oh yeah, that happened. It seemed like this game kind of came out. There was excitement for it. It was announced a long time ago. I am a little torn on it, because it is a third Bayonetta game, and I think you get what you want out of that, mostly. It's a Bayonetta game, it does play a little differently, but I had a fun time with it, for sure. But I do feel that in some respects, it is a bit lacking compared to, say, the second one. I would say it comes down to a couple factors. I mean, there's one big one that, we'll get to. The first thing is that I guess I was expecting a bit more ambition, because it has been so long since Bayonetta 2. And there has been word out there that at one point in development, the game was supposed to be more adventure feeling and have more open areas to explore. I'm not really sure that was necessary, but it does feel less ambitious than some of the other stuff Platinum has done recently. as a result. And I was hoping for a bit more of an evolution. Personally, the enemy design in this game is really, like, compared to the previous games, it's very weak. I don't think that the homunculi, or whatever they were called, their designs just, they're okay on their own, but compared to the awesome designs for the angels and the demons in the previous games, it just does not hold a candle. It's just kind of generic aliens. I guess generic Japanese aliens. Yeah, I just don't think they have that much going for them as antagonists. It's a little weird. The connection to the angel and devil theme, the Dante's Inferno theme, it's not as present in this game in many respects, and it did feel like it was missing. So it almost made me kind of, I don't know, I just felt like it was really missing the essence of and I'm not saying the lore matters, I don't care about the lore, but I thought that 1 and 2 did a lot more with that stuff. And I think there was more that could have been done. The first game was mostly about dealing with heaven. The second game was kind of in the middle, this middle realm, Acer. I thought the third game was going to have even more of the Inferno hell stuff. There was some of that in 2, but I thought 3 was going to go all out with it. And it kind of just ignored that. And the story that we got, it's one of those stories that has you kind of tired. I guess I don't know if I can blame them, or it's just I'm so collectively tired of these multiverse stories. Like, it does not make your property better to just have a multiverse where there's a billion different versions of the same characters that are slightly different. I don't know. Maybe it was a fun idea, like 7 years ago when they started doing this game or something. But by 2022, it's really played out. We're still stuck in the multiverse hell in some respects. And I just feel like it could have been more ambitious. This just felt like it was chasing a very obvious trend in Hollywood, and I wasn't thrilled with that. The actual gameplay, I had a good time with. I liked the new movesets. I liked the ability to control the demons directly. There were some cool segments in this game. And if you're looking for a platinum action game, you're going to get it here. I think they generally did a pretty solid job with all of that stuff. But I'm not that motivated to return to it compared to the other games. I did go through and kind of get all the levels and do a lot of the secret stuff, but I wasn't that motivated to replay levels to get better scores and things like that. And I think that has to come down to the conclusion of the story. And I'm going to preface this by saying I have never actually cared about the story in Bayonetta games. They aren't that good, and I skip those cutscenes constantly, as I'm sure most people do. There's not that much to it. The first game's story is, if you can leave a comment succinctly explaining everything that happened, good for you. But that information is left in my brain. I think 2's story is the simplest and probably the best for that reason. 3's story is not that complicated until it becomes incredibly complicated and the game does not really explain what the hell was happening. There are lore files that you can read after you've beaten the game, and it's just like, you have to explain this while it's happening, because I don't know what you're talking about. It just kind of felt like nonsense, and yeah, it played into this annoying idea of, like, the multiverse, where there are very specific things that have to be the same everywhere, and I was not here for it, and yeah, the ending was lame. The ending of the game assumes that you have an incredible reverence for Bayonetta, but at the same time, the way that the game is ending suggests the developers were just like, we gotta be done with this. We have to just stop it. Just stop it. We have 2 seconds to write Bayonetta out of the story. How do we do it? Here's the worst way we could. Not that it really matters, because multiverse, so there's infinite Bayonettas probably, so it doesn't even really matter what happened in this game. Yeah, it just left a bad taste in my mouth, but I can't really be too hard on it because, again, I never really cared about the story in Bayonetta. If this happened in a game where I cared about the story, I would be a lot more pissed off. But This just felt like them finally acknowledging that they weren't really trying that hard with Bayonetta's stories. And that is a shame, because I do think that Hideki Kamiya, like, when he applies himself, he can come through with a good story. I think Wonderful 101's script is, like, surprisingly good in a lot of ways. You know, that's not like an amazing story, but the way that it's told, the writing for the characters is really solid. So I don't know. I just don't get it. And he doesn't work there anymore. So yeah, Platinum, people have been wondering, how is Platinum doing? Is everything going to be okay? This game, I think, the way that it turned out was a little below what people wanted. I expected a little more, but I don't know. Who knows what Platinum is going to do next? I have not played the Bayonetta spin-off game that has come out, that they actually teased. That was cool. I like that they put like a demo for their game in Bayonetta 3. Haven't played it yet, though. It obviously looks extremely different. Maybe I'll give it a try at some point. But yeah, this was one of those things. I feel bad for people who like were really hyped for this and really waited, for 6 or 7 years, because the way that everything concludes is so tone deaf. But it is a good action game. I just think that compared to something like Astral Chain, it's not, I don't know, it just doesn't feel like it's pushing things far enough. But yeah, that's all I have to say about that. If you haven't played Bayonetta at all, it's pretty easy to get those games on Nintendo Switch. I mean, I'd recommend them if you play Devil May Cry and stuff like that. You should definitely check them out. Alright, next, we have Fire Emblem Engage. There's going to be a lot of strategy games on this list, by the way. I really felt like I was playing nothing but strategy games at one point. But yes, Fire Emblem Engage, another game that it came out almost a year ago, and it kind of feels like people have moved on. Yeah, so this game, I thought, was pretty fun. I had a good Fire Emblem-y time with it, as far as the strategy goes, the maps, the level design, the way that things have changed in this game compared to previous ones. Very, in some ways, very flexible. I really do like the emblems as a mechanic. There was some really cool stuff, but I think compared to other Fire Emblem games, it's the story in this game. All of the elements for a solid story are there. Maybe it would have been a simple story, but it would have been solid. It just kind of felt very flat, though. It was hard to really put too much investment into it. I don't know, the dialogue in the game is just very bleh. A lot of cutscenes take too long. Like, it just feels like all the information has been conveyed, but for some reason everyone is still talking, and they're not really talking about, like, anything in particular. I don't know. The characters were not bad or anything. I know there was some criticism of the art design. It kind of grew on me. I think most of the characters in the game look fine. There's some that are weird. There's some weird choices. I like the environment design. I think the game does look really nice visually compared to some of the previous Fire Emblem games. And they did fix a tremendous amount of my issues with Three Houses. Because, yeah, there is still kind of a base that you have to walk around, but you can do all that shit so fast. And that really just felt amazing. Like, okay, I can quickly resolve my base management stuff and then go. Compared to Three Houses, where that really weighed down the game. These elements were scaled back. There is some stuff that you can invest time in if you really want to, but it's very optional. I would definitely like to do a hard mode run of this at some point, or maddening. You know, like I wanted to play it again and see what it's like on the harder difficulties, because I was enjoying the way that they had kind of structured everything in the gameplay. It was fun. But yeah, story-wise, pretty simple and a bit flat. It does go in some weird places near the end, but it's a little tough to get invested for whatever reason. And I think that kind of just comes down to maybe the script. I'm not sure what else it could be, because you have Fire Emblem games like Echoes, that's a remake of an NES game, and that game has a simple story. But I think the script in it, and I guess the voice acting as well, helped really carry it through, and it was a thoroughly solid time. This game, simple story, I would argue, in some respects, too simple. It's easy to predict certain things from miles away. And the things that are legitimate twists just kind of feel like not very inspired. So, I don't know. It just, there's a lot that can be said about Three Houses, but I think that when it came to the script, or at least there was a lot of nuance, there's a lot of things going on, maybe too much stuff going on. I like a simple game to complement the strategy gameplay. Simple story, I mean. But this was just a little too simple compared to something like Fates or Awakening. I know a lot of people don't even like those games as far as the story goes, but I just felt those were done better than this. So, I think if you haven't played a Fire Emblem game, you might as well try this. I did think it was pretty solid as far as strategy goes, and you can have a good time with it. But I wouldn't spend too much time fretting over the story of the game. But it was not painful to sit through. I did not hate any characters. That's more than I can say about something like Three Houses, which has a character who I absolutely can't stand. So, it was not offensive to me, but it was kind of in the middle compared to other Fire Emblem games. And also, it was kind of weird how they had a ton of DLC that all released really fast, like extremely quickly. It gave the illusion that, this game was sitting on a shelf somewhere for a long time, and just kind of rushed out the door. It's finished game and everything, don't get me wrong, but there was not as much fanfare for this game as other Fire Emblem games in the past, so I don't know. If it really was sitting on a shelf for a while, maybe that means there's a new one that'll be announced next year, who knows. But yeah, we're gonna cover 4 games in one section here, because I feel like I don't have much to say about them, because all 4 of these games are remakes. So we have Metroid Prime, which got a remastered release. Same for Ghost Trick, Super Mario RPG, and Advance Wars 1 and 2. All of these games, remakes. We have had a lot of game remakes this year, and I avoided a lot of them because I was just kind of torn. There have been games that got remade this year where the originals I thought were fantastic and didn't really need to be remade. They didn't even really need to be changed. And that kind of stopped me from buying them. But like I said, I've got 4 on this list, and it's mostly because they're barely different. I mean, Metroid and Ghost Trick are basically the exact same game. I mean, obviously, Ghost Trick, that was a DS game, and this is not, so there's changes in that respects, and Metroid has new controls as well, but you play it, and it feels identical. Like, the second I started playing it, I was back, and it's a game I played many times, so that really... I knew what to think and how to feel immediately. This also applies to Super Mario RPG. That's a classic game from my childhood, and starting it immediately felt like coming back to the past. Just played exactly the same. That's just how it felt. And yeah, I like these things. They're good, but I don't have anything to say about them really because it's exactly what you would expect. So it's like hard to talk about in a way. It does exactly what it's supposed to do. And, maybe that's boring. Like, maybe remaking a game as faithfully as possible is boring, but I can't really say that there was a quality loss, and I'd rather have no quality loss than a remake that changes things and the changes make it worse. So, yeah, kind of a weird thing. I think the Advance Wars one, obviously, is the one where stuff has changed the most. Obviously the art style is really different, and there's some more liberties there. That one is fun. Yet another strategy game, of course, for me. But yeah, if you have not played any of these games, you should. I think Advance Wars, if you like pure strategy, Advance Wars is for you. If you haven't played Metroid Prime, I don't know what you're doing. It's one of the best games ever made. Please go play it. Ghost Trick. Fantastic puzzle game from Ace Attorney, Phoenix Wright. Really great game that was not very successful, but man, I wish we had more games like this. So I would definitely recommend checking it out. If you like puzzle games, or you like games that have a good story, very well put together mystery story. So check that one out. Super Mario RPG, classic game, not very long, but a classic. And believe me, it felt really long when you were a small child struggling to play an RPG for the first time. But we're going to move past that. We're going to talk about more new games. Next up, we have Mario plus Rabbids, Spark of Hope. Yeah, this was a fun one. Again, a tactical game, a strategy game, but also kind of an RPG. It's been a long time since I played the first Rabbids, so coming back to this was a little weird because I couldn't remember how much was different from the original as far as the core gameplay. But they've definitely made a good amount of changes, and I think a lot of them are for the better. Much better soundtrack than the first one, in my opinion. There's some really good tunes in this one. They went hard in that sense. Not much of a story. I would say it's serviceable. It's just kind of a framework. But yeah, if you like XCOM and you like Mario, this is a good mesh. And so I did have quite a bit of fun playing it. I haven't played any of the DLC for it yet. I did pick it up. It's unfortunate. It sounds like this game didn't sell that well either, and I don't know. Ubisoft just seems to really struggle with selling anything. I don't know. Are they just not marketing their games anymore? I mean, it's not like I play that many Ubisoft games, but I still kind of feel bad for them, even though they've clearly made a ton of mistakes at various points in time. I don't know. I just don't want to see them releasing dud after dud, and then a lot of people are going to lose their jobs across the world, so it's kind of an odd situation. But yeah, I mean, as far as RPGs go, it's definitely a unique one to play. And I do like this series. I hope it continues. I don't really know if it will. But I think if you see it on sale or something like that, you really might as well pick it up. I think my only issue with this game is that there were some aspects of the presentation that were a little lacking. It was noticeable. Like, you could tell this game probably needed a few more months of development because there's some polish missing. But overall, it is a solid package. Next, we get into Pikmin 4, a game that I was not really sure if I was going to buy, but I ended up picking it up. And this is just a cozy game. I mean, it's another strategy game, kind of, but this one, the strategy elements are done differently. This game makes a lot of departures from the other Pikmin games. In many respects, I would say it's less hardcore. It's easier in some respects. It does become more challenging later on, though. But I had a good time with it. It's just one of those games that it's a relaxing game to play. And I think it captures that feel, the idea of organizing and getting your tasks done efficiently, which I often struggle with in reality. So it's less nerve-wracking than other Pikmin games, but I still think it offers some fun challenges. I appreciated the return of kind of those underground dungeon levels from Pikmin 2. And even though they introduced a lot of game elements that might feel kind of oversaturated, like side quests and things like that, none of that stuff felt like it was done awkwardly or that it couldn't jive with the essence of Pikmin. You know, there's a lot of people to talk to and things like that, but it wasn't like everywhere you were going in the actual levels themselves. It was just full of people that were just, hey, help me out, stranger. That could have been done a lot worse. So, yeah, I think in some respects, this is kind of like a soft reboot of Pikmin, or like a reset. You know, it's a really good entry point if you've never played any of them. Although, it's pretty easy to pick them up on Switch. So, I recommend all the Pikmin games. I think they're pretty solid. I think, especially if you have a youngster, this would probably be a good game to get him to try. And yeah, we're pretty much at the top, because there's 2 games left that are pretty much neck and neck for favorite game of the year. It's really close. So one of those games is Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3, made by Larian Studios, a company that I had heard of. I've heard of the Divinity games, but I've never played them. I never played this game in early access, by the way. It was in early access for a long time. And I do a lot of Dungeons & Dragons, by the way. This is a Dungeons & Dragons game, and I do a lot of that. I run a lot of Dungeons & Dragons. I probably run too much Dungeons & Dragons, quite frankly. So, I have a good amount of experience with the subject matter, and, I've played some of the older D&D games. I've played parts of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. So it's not made by the original team, obviously, because that was BioWare, did the first two back in the day. It's what put BioWare on the map. I obviously don't want to just, go on a BioWare tangent here, but it's been a long time since I've played a true Western RPG that really impressed me and felt really amazing. It's been probably 10 years, maybe even longer than that. It's hard to remember. And while playing this game, I just sat there and went, where have games like this been for almost a decade? Where have they been? It's mind-blowing to me. Now, yeah, games like this take a lot of effort because it's a turn-based RPG that's very tactical, has 12 classes, has a ton of gameplay options. It's also a game that has a big story, that has all this great role-playing, all these dialogue options, lots of mechanics tied to the dialogue, obviously, quests that virtually all feel substantial. There are basically no side quests. There's just quests that you do, and it's worth doing basically all of them, because so many of them lead into future parts of the game. They have repercussions later, they unlock new quests. It just feels satisfying to do as much as possible because it has a meaningful impact on the game. When you play this game, there are times where it feels like you're playing an immersive sim. Certain segments, you feel like you're playing Deus Ex, you feel like you're playing Hitman. There are even some parts where it feels like I'm playing an older Elder Scrolls game. I really could not help but be impressed at virtually every aspect of this game, because not only is it a fantastic CRPG, but it includes these elements from other game genres that clearly require a lot of technical skill to make. It all just comes together so well. I don't know where the games like this have been. I know they take a lot of work, and that's certainly part of it, but this game has been really successful, and I'm hoping that these kinds of Western RPGs can come back in vogue, because it's achieved a lot of success, and it was really well-deserved. I did not really... I went into this not really having any assumptions, because I didn't play Early Access, I never played Divinity, and, there was hype around it, but it kind of seemed like most of the hype was just, horny weirdos who wanted to bang everything. But playing the game, this is all the kind of stuff that I want to see in a Western RPG. The way that everything was executed. This is how you do it. It's not like people just forgot. I know there were those comments going around that, game developers are like, oh man, they really raised the bar, or we'll never compete with that. There's no reason this couldn't have been done sooner. People just didn't want to make these kinds of games because it was more profitable to do Destiny or Anthem or whatever. I don't know. But I'm really hoping that this ushers in a new era of RPGs, because this is the pinnacle of something. I'm not necessarily saying this is better than what came before it. There are some games, from 10, 15, 20 years ago that are also masterfully done. I'm not saying Baldur's Gate 3 is necessarily better than those games, but it's got the advantage of modern technology, and it shows what's possible now, and in many respects it shows what was possible over the last 8 or so years, but so many companies just didn't seem interested in doing. But I think it is great on its own merits, and it's absolutely worth playing. I have met people who have said they have spent hundreds of hours in the game and they have not completed the game's first act. These people are crazy. I do not understand how that is possible. One playthrough of this game that is pretty thorough should take you 80 or so hours. I would say that's where my estimates put me. So, unless you are truly just digging around and doing nothing, you should be able to do it. It's going to take you a while, but I think it's worth it every step of the way. There's very little in this game that feels like something I would skip on another playthrough. Quite frankly, this game does a fantastic job. I don't think I've seen this since Mass Effect, of having so many options for repeat playthroughs. And I don't just mean story-related. I mean, you've got all these different classes that you can play. You can play as a party member. You don't even create your own avatar. You can play as one of the 6 party members, see how that changes things. You can play as the Dark Urge, which is it definitely adds a new dimension to the game and makes the story much more interesting at certain points. You can also just say, screw it, I don't want to use any of the party members, and create a team of custom characters and play really with whatever builds that you want. You can play with friends. The fact that this game is 4-player co-op, that's amazing. I haven't really gotten a chance to do a lot of multiplayer, but I'm so excited for it, because I think in some respects that's something I've really been hoping for over 10 years. I remember playing, you know, some of those older BioWare games and just being like, imagine playing this with a friend, where you've got a story with this much fidelity, you've got an RPG this solid, and you can play it with friends. It looks like they did a good job here, but I want to see more of that. Games that are single player but can be done in co-op, rather than games that are traditionally single player, sacrificing everything for a broad multiplayer component that often ushers in a lot of other problems. So I really do think that this is a fantastic game. I'm super happy that it's done well, and it deserves the accolades. Deserves all of the accolades that it gets. That said, I think this game is only a hair underneath the next one on the list. And that's purely for technical reasons, because as great as this game is, it certainly has its share of bugs. They have been really efficient with patches. There are a lot of patches for this game done really quickly, but there are still some pretty noticeable bugs. The game actually crashed during the ending for me the first time I beat it. So, yeah. It's not as stable as it probably should be. And for that reason, I have to put it ever so slightly below another game that I played this year for my personal best game of the year of those that I have played thus far. And that would be Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, a game that I think there were a lot of expectations for, and Nintendo didn't really want to talk about it too much. And I think that was a worthwhile endeavor here, because games like this are all about making discoveries yourself. We have a massive open world, there's things everywhere to discover, and it's so open that nobody's going to have the same experience. The ways that people play this kind of game, it's going to be totally different, one person to the next. I really do appreciate that style of game. I'm not saying every game needs to be like that, but playing some of the best open world games, that's the thing that you appreciate. It's just how different our experiences can be. But when you look at something like Breath of the Wild, of course, that game, when that came out, I not only appreciated how everybody's going to be playing differently, because everybody's going to just go somewhere different at the start of the game, and that's going to dictate a lot of their playtime, exploring that local area. That's going to be their first impressions of a lot of things. This game certainly has that as well. They don't exactly tell you where things are. You know, that those first impressions, those natural discoveries, in a game like this just feel a lot more impactful than tutorials and things like that. The scope is really awesome. You know, you have the stuff in the sky. You've got Hyrule. Yes, it's similar, but not exactly the same to the way it was in the previous game. And then you have everything underneath. And discovering that stuff naturally blew my mind at times. Really did feel like a game about exploration in a way that many games are not. But those tools, the building mechanics, those were just, I really couldn't believe it. Now, I'm not one of those people who will spend, hours trying to build something for fun. I love trying to just come up with solutions and try things out and see if it's possible. And this is one of those things that is going to set everybody's playthrough apart, is what you built, how you built it, where you built it. I loved doing any of the shrines that required building and kind of creating these machines. This is not a game that holds your hand. To see an incredibly mainstream company making a game like this, where if you just can't think of the solution, we're not gonna go anywhere. You've got to figure this out yourself. To see the extent to which they carried that through, that's really surprising, because there are a lot of mainstream games that are so obsessed with making sure that you see everything you're supposed to see, that you don't have time to stop and smell the roses. You just, okay, very linear, you've gotten all the trophies already, it's too straightforward, and blah blah blah. And that's not an inherently bad thing, but there are some kinds of games where that's not the experience that I want. And to see a really mainstream company like Nintendo doing this, I was shocked. I had a lot of respect for them. They really doubled down on these elements from the previous game. They had a very specific vision that they wanted to develop. And that's what we got. If you don't like this new formula of Zelda, then I don't know if Tears of the Kingdom is going to be for you. Because, yeah, it's really different. And I'm not saying every Zelda game should be like this. But it also sounds like the Zelda design team agrees. There's no DLC for this game. They've spoken in several interviews about how the next Zelda game is going to be its own thing. It's going to be totally different from this. This all might just kind of be a little bit of a, I don't want to say a diversion, an anomaly in the grand scheme of Zelda, but there are so many great things about this game that I want them to take and implement in future games. But I would be okay with more structure, more true dungeons as we are used to them, although there really wasn't anything in this game that I straight up didn't like when it came to how the boss battles are done, how these dungeon areas are done. I think all that stuff is better than it was in the previous game. And I had a really great time. It's not a very narrative-heavy game, and I don't think most Zelda games are. But it's not really about that. This was very much about the experience. Yeah, it's just the kind of game where if you're one of those people who enjoy kind of quiet moments, and you enjoy, as weird as it is, if you enjoy solitude in a virtual space, being out there and finding these things yourself, and if you enjoy just pushing limits, there's so many limits to push with all the things you can build. If you want to get from point A to point B, there's a lot of ways you could do it. And the degree of freedom in a game like this, a game that is still, structured to some degree, there's a story, there's a main quest. This is not a Minecraft world, it's not procedural. There's enough of a framework there, but it's a framework you can really push to the edge. And I had a lot of fun with that. I really did. It's one of those games I wish I could erase my memory and go back from the beginning. And just experience it all again. Although, I will say, it might be nice if we had a master mode or something like that. That's kind of a missed opportunity. It might be interesting to see something like that, but I don't know. I mean, this is it. It seemed like a very complete package, and I'm okay with that. I know there was some concern about the $70 price point, but I feel like I got everything I wanted out of it. So, it didn't bother me too much. I don't know, use your play coins. Maybe that's my advice. But yeah, it's been a really great year for games, and there are a lot of games that I haven't even gotten around to playing yet. Pretty soon there's going to be 3 Yakuza games that I need to play. So that will take up a lot of my time. I will play the Resident Evil 4 remake at some point to see how it stacks up to the original. I feel very bad that I wasn't able to get to Octopath Traveler 2. I was really looking forward to that. Armored Core 6, Mario Wonder, There's a Warhammer 40k RPG, Rogue Trader, which came out recently. I'm going to keep my eye on that one. That tactical game, that Unicorn Overlord, I think that's what it's called. I'm curious about that one. And, of course, I'm also looking forward to coming back to Y2K. Don't worry, I do plan on doing at least one proper video at some point this year, so it's all about finding the time to really put it together. But I do want to get back to making videos regularly. I probably could have done some this year. I just was very focused on other things for the time being. But I would like to change that. So I hope you had a great year of gaming, and otherwise, I don't know, let me know what your favorite games were from this year, and I'll see you all next time.